Papa Nurgle, the final god in the Pantheon of the Chaos Gods. You guys have really shown a lot of interest in these Chaos God videos, so I am happy to tell you guys that I will be doing more of them because you guys are really enjoying this. We do have the elf gods that we can go into and the human gods, but today we'll focus on, it's really not gonna fuck, Big Papa Nurgle here, the father of decay, the lord of decay. We're gonna go through the 6th edition Hordes of Chaos book with the nice little blurb about Nurgle himself. We'll actually read from the 7th edition Demons of Chaos book, and I'll do something interesting. I'm going to read his realm like I've done for all the other gods, but I'm also going to read a nice little like narrative piece. I'm not going to do it in my voice. I'll do it in like kind of a different voice to kind of add to the theme and the character of everything. It might sound like shit, might sound excellent. I don't know. I have a kind of a weird voice, so we'll do that. And then we'll also go over the 8th edition Demons of Chaos book to talk about the units that we see worshipping the great, not the great unclean one, well, Nurgle himself. We'll go into who the great unclean one is though. But let's start off here with Nurgle, Lord of Decay. Known also as Nurglich, Onogal, Neaglin, and by many other titles, Nurgle is the Lord of Decay. It is he who unleashes famines and pestilence upon the world, and so it is to Nurgle that mortals turn when they wish protection from the ravages of disease, age, and the inevitable decline brought by the passing years. When the crops are spoilt, when a child falls feverish, and when wounds begin to fester on the field of battle, supplicants are offered to Nurgle for him to stay his hand. To his followers, Nurgle appears as a massively bloated creature, festering with boils, poxes, and surrounded by a dark cloud of flies, each of which carries the symbol of the god upon its carapace. His skin is rent and torn, and from his exposed guts spill the Nurglings, the spiteful mites of Nurgle. Nurgle is said to delight in every new pox, every unique rash and blister, and of all the gods takes the most interest in the plight of his mortal followers. Nurgle is portrayed as a kindly, almost jovial god, known often as Father or Grandfather Nurgle. While foolish non-believers may moan and gnash their teeth and pull their hair when plague sweeps the lands, and villages and towns and tumble into ruins, those dedicated to Nurgle laugh to see the great works of their master. They have accepted the futility of defying Nurgle and the inescapable dilapidation that he brings, and instead embrace the delights of decay and disease, the pleasures of entropy and ruin. He bestows his gifts of pestilence and decay with a generous spirit. Nurgle's champions ravaged by disease are themselves protected by such plagues, for they become inured to the pain and discomfort, and while their bodies may corrupt, the spirit of Nurgle sustains them when lesser mortals would die. Thus, the champions of Nurgle can endure wounds and afflictions that would cripple others, and yet still fight on in his name. They are horrific to look upon, more so even than other champions of chaos, for their peeling flesh, their stomachs bloated with corpse gases, and their charnel stench is a reminder of the fate that awaits all living creatures. So, Nurgle actually does, like they said here, he's portrayed as kind of a kindly, jovial god, and that's why he kind of has the moniker Father Nurgle, Grandfather Nurgle. And as we'll see from the next little bit we're about to read here, Nurgle is more often than not portrayed as someone who doesn't necessarily, he's like the Lord of Decay, and people think decay, death, ruin, plague, all this. He actually has a little bit more to him. Nurgle's more about the cycle of life. He's about death and then the new creation of life as a result to then die again. He's all about that circle. And a lot of the gods you can kind of see as not enigmatic again, but they're not 100% evil. They're solely devoted though to one thing. Like when you look at Khorne, it's all about the purity of battle, which brings about, death, blood, murder, all that action. And then Tzeentch is all about change and knowledge and wisdom, but to the extent that it affects those around you. And Slaanesh is all about, I don't want to say depravity in its entirety, but it's about the pursuit of pleasure and what that brings, the pride and the downfall from there. And so with Nurgle, you've got life in its entirety, in its circle, and he maybe focuses more on the death portion of it from his plagues and poxes. But again, he is all about that circle. So let's read about the land of the Plague Lord here. So, let me get to it. There we go. I'd messed myself up there. On the border of Tzeentch's realm is the domain of Nurgle, the great lord of decay, who presides over physical corruption and morbidity. Nurgle can truly be called the father of all pestilence, for his immense frame is home to every disease known to mortals. His gigantic body is bloated and corruption and exudes an overpowering stench. His skin is greenish, leathery, and necrotic, its surface pockmarked with running sores, swelling boils, and numerous signs of infestation. Nurgle's inner organs, rank with excremental decay, spill through the ruptured skin to hang like obscene fruit around his girth. From these organs burst tiny demons which chew on the rotting bowels and suck upon the nauseous juices within. Such is the appearance of the Chaos God Nurgle, though mere words can barely do justice to his truly impressive foulness. Although Nurgle is ranked behind Khorne and Tzeentch, the rule is that his power is not necessarily weaker, just less stable than that of the other gods. When Nurgle unleashes his ghastly pestilences, his power rises to a peak. Like a plague, his power grows and may reach pandemic proportions, temporarily overshadowing that of all the other gods put together. It is for this reason that Nurgle commands a wary respect from all of his other brothers. Though Nurgle's demonic legions may not be as ferocious as those of Khorne, nor as numerous as those of Tzeentch, when Nurgle's power waxes, even demons can fall prey to his repertoire of grisly afflictions. Nurgle's great delight is in the cycle of existence, in life and death. At the heart of his moldering mansion, he indulges his passion. Beneath mildewed and sagging beams, the great god labors for untold hours at an iron cauldron, a receptacle vast enough to contain all of the oceans of the world. Nurgle works to create contagion and pestilence, the simplest yet most fecund forms of life. Such is the ghastly irony of Nurgle's existence. Everything he does is with the goal of bringing more life into the world. Yet so many of his creations are inimical to the other beings that Nurgle is widely thought of as a destroyer, not a creator. With every stir of Nurgle's maggot-ridden ladle, a dozen fresh diseases flourish. From time to time, Nurgle ceases his stirring and reaches down with a leathery hand to scoop a portion of the ghastly mixture into his cavernous mouth and taste the fruits of his labor. Should the putrid soup meet with approval, the god waddles to the corner of his workshop where he holds Pox Fulcrum, a demon blessed with the ability to heal infections, but afflicted with a vulnerability to them all. Opening the corroded cage, Nurgle forces him to imbibe the putrid mixture, watching the ill-concealed excitement for the signs and symptoms of his latest creation. Though Pox Fulcrum inevitably purges the disease from his body, the efficacy with which he does so allows the Plague Lord to evaluate his creations. If Nurgle is pleased, he returns to his cauldron. As he empties it into the grate below, the teeming liquid falls as a rain upon the mortal world. If the concoction does not meet with Nurgle's approval, he begins to prepare his soup anew. As for Pox Fulcrum, she whispers to mortals while the Plague Father is busy at his cauldron, apprising them of cures for the ailments Nurgle unleashes upon the world. So has she entered the beliefs of 1,000 cultures under 1,000 names. Some mortals believe her to be Nurgle's daughter, who cures only so that new diseases can take hold, while others see her as Nurgle's bitter foe, a deity of healing and patron of the afflicted. This is the Garden of Blight. Pestilence is not Nurgle's sole obsession. When not laboring at his own iron cauldron, Nurgle cultivates his garden with a tenderness and pride utterly at odds with his rank and loathsome appearance. As with all worldly things within the world realms of chaos, Nurgle's overgrown garden is of scale large enough to befuddle the mind. Within its bounds are the plants and trees drawn from 1,000 worlds across 100 realities. Bright sprays of red, blue, yellow, and purple puncture the autumnal gloom. Havens of splendid cherryness in a dismal woodscape. Each strain of flora flourishes in its peculiar environment, though not all are immediately recognizable. Like any gardener, Nurgle cannot resist the recombining of his beloved strains. Almost everything in the Plague Father's garden is some strange hybrid of vegetable, fungoid, or demonic life. Perhaps as a result of this, the garden is alive with a kind of ghastly intelligence. It is not sentient as such, but has enough carnivorous instinct and drive to attack intruders, its plague-smothered vines bestowing all manner of deathly poxes on those who foolishly come within reach. As Nurgle's power grows, so too does the splendor of his garden. At the zenith of the Plague Lord's power, the undergrowth becomes vital enough to burst over its boundaries and cast murky tendrils onto Tzeentch's crystal labyrinth. Left unchecked, the decaying presence of Nurgle's plants crack and weather the arcane geodes from which the labyrinth is composed. Such an assault, however unwitting, inevitably provokes Tzeentch's minions to instinctively attack the incursive foliage, using Sorcerer's Fire to scour root, stem, and branch from the shimmering labyrinth. This in turn rouses the wrath of Father Nurgle. Before long, the demonic servants of the Great Sorcerer and the Plague Lord are at war once again. Such battles can last seconds or centuries, for they only cease when Nurgle's powers, and thus the unchecked growth of his garden, recedes again. So now we'll go into this little bit about the Garden of Decay, and I'm just going to read it in just kind of a different format than I usually do to kind of express the narrative portion of it. This is not like a factual, well, quote-unquote factual, lore-based piece. This is just strictly a narrative piece, so it's not going to have any like cool little tidbits like above. Distance. I saw a great fortress, half hidden by the miasma of decay that infused its very structure. Rotten and mildewed were its timbers, and its sagging roof was thick with infestation of every conceivable kind. Poison poured down the walls of this most revolting of abodes, polluting everything about. Yet, despite its state of decay, I sensed an inevitability about that unhallowed bastion. I knew beyond doubt that I had stood for years uncounting in that same ramshackle form, and would continue on until the very end of time. Before the fortress's gates stretched a forest of death. Corpses, thick with unbridled decay, lay about it as far as my eyes could see. Here death was feeding off the dead. This was the Garden of Chaos. Vile creatures nested amongst the bones of the dead, there to gnaw at the fallen and fill the air with the sickly sound of merriment. Here dark trees had petrified, their shapes indescribable, and their essence corrupt. The graves of the fallen had become a rich loam sucked upon by the trees of that dark forest. Pierced by the tree roots, the dead had stirred once more, and each branch bore a skull, mildewed and heavy with loathing. In the place I looked upon the fate of mankind and wept for the future. From the Liber Malefic. But that kind of covers the realm of Nurgle. We have heard about Nurgle himself now, but let's go into his units. But again, you get the sense here that he is like a patron god of life and death. It's really hard to say that when it comes to Nurgle because he's just so fuck ugly. But you see that he works on plagues that kill, but he also works on gardens and procures and tends to gardens that are born of life. Even though it's a twisted kind of malicious form of life, it's still life nonetheless. So with Nurgle, just like every other Chaos God, we have the Greater Demons. And his Greater Demons are called the Great Unclean Ones. They're these giant, huge, fat sacks of quite literal shit and various diseases and everything. Just like Nurgle himself, their stomachs are pouring open with little Nurglings coming out of them and shit. Oh, it's just so hideous looking. Like, I've never been able to stomach Nurgle because they're so goddamn hideous. But they even go by a bunch of disgusting names. Fly Masters, Stench Lords, Nurgle's Plague Fathers. So that's your Greater Demon here. Then we also have the Plague Bearers of Nurgle. This is kind of like your standard foot unit for them. These guys are these giant, like, cyclopean, just disgusting creatures, bloated pus everywhere. They're called the Tainted Ones, the One-Eyed Rotters, the Horned Rot Bags, which is a very fitting name for them. But he does have some flying units. The Plague Drones of Nurgle. These guys are the Blighted Swarmers, the Fester Wings, the Bubonic Buzzers, which almost sounds like a really shitty, like, I don't know, minor league basketball team from Europe in like the Middle Ages. Like, oh, the Bubonic Buzzers. I know they didn't have basketball in the Middle Ages, but just stick with my wild fantasy of a minor league team with the name Bubonic Buzzers because it's hilarious to me. These guys have like they literally ride like not wasps, but they kind of look like what the hell are these things called? They look like giant bloat flies, to be totally honest. And then you've got Beasts of Nurgle, and we've seen these guys in a lot of mods, like the Ultimate Chaos mod. We've straight up seen these Beasts of Nurgle, the Slime Hounds, the Putrid Bounders, the Tentacled Plague Dogs. We also then have Nurglings, and the Nurglings are little, little guys that just kind of chutter out of these Great Unclean Ones and Nurgle's stomach. They're little tiny. They basically look like smaller versions of Plague Bearers with 2 eyes rather than 1. But I had misspoken. Nurgle's mount is a palanquin. I completely forgot about that. So this kind of talks about palanquins as well, so that you can have those little mounts to get up on, as it is. But the special character for Nurgle, one of them, is Epidemius, the Maggot King, the Plagued Panjandrum, the Reckoner of Mortality, as he is called. And he's basically like a special. I don't want to say he's a possessed individual. I don't want to read his little goodies until we hear more about a possible Nurgle announcement. But he's a monstrous cav. He's this big unit, and he's just fucking disgusting. He reminds me a lot of Glotkin, which is in the end times, unfortunately. And Glotkin is just all manner of disgusting. But you also have Kugoth Plaguefather, who's the named Greater Demon here, the Foetid Brewmaster, the Plague Weaver, the Rotting Poxmaker. So that kind of rounds out Nurgle here for you guys, and rounds out the Pantheon of the Chaos Gods. I know with Norska being launched here pretty soon, we have seen a possibility for these guys to come on in, and we've even seen that the Changer of Ways is going to be what am I going to say? Changer of Ways have been associated with some of the Norska gods, so we're kind of thinking like, you know, the Hound is going to be associated with Khorne. So it'll be interesting to see in the couple weeks here. August 10th, I believe, is when we get the actual Norska drop. What we're going to see with those Norska gods and how they're going to manifest. Is this going to be finally the time that we see the Chaos Gods in Total War Warhammer 1? And with this, are we going to see regiments of renown for Chaos that hearken to those gods? You know, like, are we going to see some Berserkers of Khorne, quote unquote? Well, actually, those are 40k, but still, some Chaos Warriors with the Khorne marks on them. God damn it! But and if we're looking at like how Nurgle would work as a whole, I would imagine like very sturdy units. So in tabletop, all of Nurgle has high toughness. So they are like, so when you have your Chaos Warriors of Nurgle, they have an additional point of toughness, which they already have high toughness. Then they have their heavy armor, which they already have high armor saves. So you have this walking block of death that doesn't maybe put up the most damage, but it can absorb so much damage that it doesn't really matter. It's just there. It's just gonna like atrophy through your army, and that's kind of like the way that Nurgle works. Is that rather than having a huge amount of damage like Khorne, he just has very moderate to normal damage with a high amount of defense. So you would see in a Nurgle army something with a lot of melee armor, a lot of melee defense, just kind of standard, pretty run-of-the-mill melee attack and weapon strength, but poison attacks, sundering armor, you know, because the Nurgle's touch rots armor and stuff like that, and it always talks about how the spells decay and molder things. And what we're actually going to do is go through the 3 Chaos magics. We've got the Lore of Tzeentch, the Lore of Nurgle, and the Lore of Slaanesh. We'll do those all together as one video, so you guys can actually even get an idea for Nurgle's spells in general, because the Children of Nurgle is one of the lore attributes. There's the Stream of Corruption, there's a Miasma of Pestilence, Blade of Putrefaction, the Plague Wind, there's all these, and that's a magical vortex if you haven't gotten that. All these abilities that hinder on this notion of destroying things and rotting them from the inside out, and making it so that they're heavily debuffed, poisoned attacks and stuff like that. So that is, again, this is Nurgle in a nutshell, guys. Hopefully you got a really good idea from these Chaos Pantheon videos, how these Chaos Gods work and how they operate and how they will come into the Total War Warhammer world. You know, you just don't choose Slaanesh because his name's Slaanesh. You choose Slaanesh because you want a certain type of army. You want Khorne because you want it up and close and personal. You know, you want Tzeentch because you want to do a lot of spell casting. So hopefully, again, this gave you guys a really good idea of what's going to be going on with Norska DLC. I will be doing a stream that entire day, and if you do get a chance to watch it, and you haven't already pre-ordered Total War Warhammer 2, I will be giving away the DLC for free to any one of our viewers that does not have the DLC free through Total War Warhammer 2. Alternatively, I will be doing a stream for Total War Warhammer 2 and giving away a game for free. Just kind of depends on where we'll get view-wise, but I'm going to take those days off of work, so I know a lot of us, like, the worst thing about, like, being a gamer and also having games released on a Tuesday is the fact that people are playing them while you're at work, and you're just like begrudgingly looking at Reddits and like news sites, like reading through reviews, trying to catch some like quick tips before you play. So Hopefully this will be a really good way for those of you that'll actually be at work to get a chance to see what the game's like or get some quick tips on it or stuff like that before you jump into your own playthrough. You can see me fuck up and learn and just roll through my mistakes first before you make your own. But thanks for watching here today, guys. We got a lot of cool stuff planned this week. Going to do another video on Ulthuan where we go over all the regions of Ulthuan just like we did for Naggaroth. So stay tuned for that. That'll probably be coming out on Warhammer Wednesday. But thanks for watching here, guys. Have a good week, and I'm looking forward to any kind of reveals that we get from Creative Assembly. Take care.